How is it going, folks? It is Thursday night, and you know what that means. Your Big Gold Belt Wrestling podcast is streaming live, and we got so much to get into this week. We had WrestleDream going down in Tacoma, Washington. We had a cap put on most of the career of Bryan Danielson, so we'll take a look at that and some other stuff going on there. We have a group that is running roughshod over AEW, and people have very different feelings on that, so I want to talk about that some tonight. And also, the PWI Women's 250 has dropped. We always going to check out that list, so we will get into that. And who knows what else, folks? We got a full hour ahead of us, so buckle in. Your Big Old Belt Wrestling podcast starts right now.
Big Gold Belt, 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 Big Gold Belt. All I really want is that Big Gold Belt, 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 Big Gold Belt. All I really need that Big Gold Belt.
Hello, everyone. We are so glad to have you here with us tonight on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. So much to get into tonight. Lots of wrestling to talk about. As always, there is just, if anything, there might be too much going on in pro wrestling these days. Because I remember back in the day, it used to be, we'd have to kind of, sometimes some weeks we'd have to figure out what we're going to talk about. We might have to pull some teeth. It ain't like that no more. There's always stuff going on. And if anything, we can't fit it into the hour. But we're here for the next hour to talk some stuff about pro wrestling, talk about WrestleDream, whole bunch of other stuff. So glad you're here with us tonight. To my left, I have Damian G down in the Lone Star State, and to my right is Silly Sellis. I'm Will, dead center in front of you. Gentlemen, how are you all doing this week?
Can't complain except for my Guardians about to lose after we were up 3-1 with back-to-back Jacks right now, but that's a separate story. But we look like
let me not even talk about my Mets, bro. Let's just kind of
I'm rooting for you. I'm telling you, I want Guardians Mets World Series. That's what I want. But luckily, we just got a double here in the bottom of the eighth. We'll see what happens. One out. I'm watching, but
focus, sir. Focus.
I got two TVs going right there. My monitor here, TV there. Let's do this.
I think last week he had to sit out because the Niners were playing. So
that's right.
We split between baseball and everything. So we know how it is there with Silly Sellis when the games are on. So it's all good. We're gonna have a fun time here tonight. So we got some of the guys are out this week. We got 2 Chains on the Wayne feed. If you're into New York City Comic Con, the Big Old Belt Media feed is all Comic Con right now. 2 Chains is on location covering Comic Con up in New York City. So lots of breaking stuff at Big Gold Belt on the social media. So we'll be pumping that a lot tonight because, as always, it's not just wrestling here. It's wrestling, movies, comics, and more with the spotlight on the comics this week with New York City Comic Con going on. So with that said, let's rewind a week in the wrestling world to Tacoma, Washington last Saturday night for AEW WrestleDream that went down. And we talked about it last week going into the show that the big theme that had been hanging over this show, the big cloud maybe as opposed to a theme, was, is this going to be the end of the road for Bryan Danielson? And, his part of the country, the Pacific Northwest, he's made this whole plan to, hang him up if he loses, the AEW championship. He's taken on Jon Moxley. Viable, that definitely someone who, has definitely more of a chance than some of the people he's defended a title against. So it was like, if it's going to happen anywhere, this is probably where it's going to happen, or maybe they'll string it on longer. But the chances were high, and we were not swerved or nothing. They did what we thought they would do. Bryan Danielson drops the AEW title to Jon Moxley in the main event, putting a cap, as they are saying, on his full-time career. They're not calling it a full-on, retirement, but making it clear that he is not going to be around for a while. Then hell, on top of that, they sent him to the glue factory practically after the match, brought out the plastic bag again, beat the crap out of him at Mox and his whole gang. I don't know, they don't have a name, do they?
Retribution.
They wear plain white t-shirts, and they're beating the crap out of people, but they don't have a name yet, it seems. So whoever they are, his little gang with Marina Shafir and his whole crew of, former Blackpool Combat Club members,
right?
They're doing their thing. They're taking names. They beat people up, took Bryan Danielson out of the picture. So I guess before we even look at the rest of the card, let's talk Bryan Danielson. I guess thoughts on the way they did this, using this as the way to write him out. That night, I definitely saw some people who were like all about it, thought it was great. Send it, use him to like put heat on Mox and all this and this new group they're trying to do. And I saw other people being like, why didn't they give him the Sting send off? Why didn't they give him the happy ending in his hometown? Why did they go for the heat in the hometown deal? Damian, I'm going to go to you first. Thoughts on how they wrapped this up, how they put a bow on Bryan Danielson.
I loved how they put the bow on it with the bag and the choking and the Yuta feeling some sort of way before he showed his true colors. This is what Bryan wanted. He wanted to go out like this. All reports, or pretty much most of the reports, are saying that that's the ending he wanted for himself, to end his full-time career in his hometown. I mean, it's not Aberdeen, but close enough, in front of friends and family. And he's the kind of guy that gives back to the wrestling business. We talk about, how do you go out? Going out on your back is typically how people go out, right?
Mhm.
It's Sting is different because it's Sting, right? And I'm not trying to say Bryan Danielson isn't on that Sting level in terms of just what he means to the wrestling business, but a wrestler who is a born and bred wrestler is going to want to go out like a wrestler in the realm of wrestling, which is going out on your back in a definitive feud and be like, for instance, when he left WWE, how'd he go out? On his back, right? Double pin.
Over the tribal chief.
Yeah, to the tribal chief. So why wouldn't he want to go out this way, ironically enough, to another former Shield member? Because apparently, like the last 3 times lost and left, it's been the Shield folk. So if Bryan said, hey, I've been wrestling how many years? This was my last year as a full-time wrestler. When I lose this title, I need to get some surgery. What better way to write you off long-term is in an asphyxiation angle where we have the plastic bag of doom, and then we stomp your ass out on the stretcher. Yeah, I think he did the right thing. That's what he would have wanted. Shit, that's what I would have wanted if I was going out that way. I wouldn't want to be eradicated to get heat for that heel. And then I go out and live my life. So I don't understand why the IWC is like, oh, he should have gone out the way he wanted to. He did. This is how we wanted it to go. So why can't y'all be happy?
Now let's get in here.
For me, I would definitely agree with you, Damian. One of the things that I want to say, you kind of made a great point, and I just want to seal it with this. Sting is the icon. Bryan, is a fighter. So when you think about the two avenues of what they've done in their career, of course, Sting being an icon, it has to be a showcase type for him because he's been that way his whole career. From the WCW, NWA to what he's doing at AEW now, he was an icon. He's like one of those superheroes that you think of, okay, let's let this superhero have the good storytelling inning. So like a good PG-13 movie that you would see. Bryan, on the other hand, is that rated R John Wick type that goes down fighting no matter how you like him, root for him, things of that nature. He's going to go down in a way where you don't know what's going to be the end, but he's going down fighting. Depending on John Wick 4, if you saw the ending of the movie, no spoiler, you saw how that ended. This is kind of similar to what Bryan wanted for him. And I think, for Bryan, this is something that is the storybook to who he was as a wrestler, from the indies of what he's done to how he even got to WWE to what he wanted to do in AEW. The biggest thing, I'm just happy for Bryan that he didn't end his way or end his career as a full-time performer due to injury. That's something that was always in the back of my mind of I don't want his last sight of him being injured and cannot continue to perform because of an injury. Now he did it in a way where, yes, he came in as a fighter. I'm gonna go out as a fighter, and when you look at me, you'll always look at me not as a performer, but as a true wrestler. And I think that's what he wanted to do, and he showcased that here, and especially in the state of Washington, his home state. And I think, what other way would you want to do it?
Yeah, that makes sense to me all around. Knowing how Danielson has always been, like I said, he went out the same way in WWE. I mean, God, that ended that WrestleMania with the double stack pin. Then he came back about a month later on SmackDown for a one-on-one match with Roman Reigns and, got laid out again. So the idea of him going out on his back, that's old school pro wrestling. Like I said, that's as old school as it gets. So I don't think that should shock anybody, especially coming off of how they did his title win in Wembley, where he got the big moment with the family, with his wife, with his kids in the ring. We just saw that back in August. It's only been 2 months. Doing that again, it would not ring the same. It wouldn't have the same effect. This was the move. You can't do the teary-eyed family win and all this, everyone hugging each other, kids in the ring all the time, especially when we just saw the same guy doing it 2 months ago. It needed to be different. This was the move, doing it like this. Now, that said, I don't know about doing this necessarily to benefit Jon Moxley of all people. I don't know if he necessarily needed it, but we'll get into that later with what this group is and what they're doing with all that stuff. Before we get to the rest of the card, let's finish up talking about Danielson here. Since they're describing this as the end of his full-time career, and clearly we are not going to see him for a while. There's talk about surgery and all this, so he's getting fixed up, getting all kinds of stuff that he's been putting off done. We're not going to see him for a while. So, with this wrapping up his full-time career, what exactly would his legacy be in pro wrestling, do you think? Where does Bryan Danielson, I guess, fit? And I've seen a lot of people be like straight up, oh, greatest wrestler of all time.
Easy.
I don't think I can go that far. But there's definitely some kids out there who want to say greatest wrestler of all time, period.
I will say the wrestler. It's that simple. He's the wrestler. When he was in WWE and we were heavy on sports entertainment, he changed his style to be strictly wrestling, to be entertaining, but he was always known more as a wrestler. Going back to Ring of Honor, Dragon Gate, all the above. He has been a quintessential wrestler. Now, I'm not going to say he's the best of all time. That's a different debate. But for this generation, let's say the last decade, he's been the wrestler.
I think the 2000s is a fair thing.
Yeah, so everyone say best in the world, best in the world. I'm willing to say best in America in the last 20 years, not counting New Japan, things like that. I'll say that. But I will say his legacy for me is he's the wrestler. But now he'll be part-time. Now he becomes a special attraction, which makes you want to tune in to a Bryan Danielson match. It's not like, okay, he's going to wrestle Okada. Okay, he's going to wrestle, let's say, Kenny. No, when he pops up eventually and the Flight of the Valkyries kicks in one more time, you're going to pop, you're going to like it, and you're going to see who he wrestles because he's a wrestler. So that's his legacy to me. He's the wrestler.
For me, I would say, if I say the standard of the best technical wrestler of all time, I would say Bret Hart.
Yes.
And when I compare Bryan Danielson to Bret Hart, and I don't mean to be cliche when I say this, yes, he's a Hall of Famer. Yes, he's an all-time great. But when you think about the tiers of all time, he's a B-plus player. And I want to say, because, Bryan, yes, he was great when he wrestled. He wasn't always the best on the mic. He didn't always have the best stories, but he always gave you his all. And I want to say, when you think about just, all landscapes of AEW, WWE, WCW, NWA, whatever, territory that you want to say and think about wrestling, it's a lot of wrestlers we can't oversee that I don't think that Bryan is better than them, but he's good in his class of his own. But once again, that's like a very, very, very high B plus. Looking at AEW, I think he is what AEW needed for the time when you started with, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and then Cody starting the show. They needed somebody to transcend of what you wanted AEW to be. I think he did that very well because he brought a different scope of type of wrestling to AEW to help bring in identity. But I think at his age and where he was in his career, he's not going to be the gold standard of what that promotion was, but he had to help carry to transcend what you want the future to be. And I think he did that very well. It's very much so, and I'm using these sport references all day today, is very it's very like descending what you see Edgerrin James do with the Indianapolis Colts. All-time great running back for the Indianapolis Colts. But what he did for the Cardinals during that time, they did make a Super Bowl run. They didn't win it, but he instilled that franchise to be somebody to take serious. And I think that's what Bryan Danielson did to AEW. Once again, all-time great. Do I think he's one of the best? Absolutely. But is he the best of all time? I can't say that.
Yeah, I would go We got people saying the best of all time or the GOAT or all that. I would go with the phrasing among the best of all time, maybe in the top 10, maybe even top 5. But I think in that conversation of top, all-time greats, your Bret Hart in the 90s, your Ric Flair in the 80s, you got definitely Bryan Danielson in the 2000s. Up there, with you got your All Japan guys and your territory guys and all this, whether we're talking Misawa or Kobashi or Barry Windham back in the day, you're great workers, you're great in-ring guys of different eras. He's right there neck and neck with all of them. That's where I'll put him. He's among the best of all time. I don't know if I can go greatest of all time, but I like how you put it, Damian, with the idea of if we're talking the 2000s, his era really, he's definitely up there. He's definitely got to be among that top 5 for sure, whatever it would be. Maybe top 3. Hell, maybe he is the top, but easily he's in the conversation without a doubt, is I think the safest way to put it. So
would we say one more thing now I'm thinking about it?
Yeah.
Would we say that he had one of the greatest, and I'm going to use this phrase because it makes sense to me, rags to riches stories in wrestling, from where he started to where he wound up and everything in between, not counting the B+ player stuff in WWE, but from where he started to where he wound up, and now we're talking about him as one of the greatest of all time. Like, is that one of the highest, like, end-to-ends that we've ever seen this generation or beyond?
I think it's hard to say, and I love the question. I think it's hard to say because we don't know a lot of the stories that came through the 80s and 90s and what that indie scene looks like compared to how open it is today. I think for what we see in this generation of where we are, yes, it's probably one of the best rags to riches, as you mentioned, because we've seen it literally from where he started in those indies and how it evolved to where he was. Like when you talk about independent wrestlers, he probably was the biggest independent wrestler that we recognized on NXT when they put them on there for that phase of
Good
how they started
point.
NXT.
Right. Right.
But
He showed up as a name.
correct.
Yes.
Right. But I think if we had the background stories, what we did back in, let's say, late 90s to early 2000s, where we had the OVW days, we might have some bigger rags to riches, similar to what John Cena did before we knew what he was as a name during the Ruthless Aggression era. So I think in this time period, yes. But it's kind of hard to say of what those rag to riches would have been if we would have known about them back then, like the way how it's open now.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. He's in the discussion. He's in the discussion with your Bret Hart, your Shawn Michaels, all your names when we think of like your great in-ring guys. So,
and he's not done. It's just his full time is done. He's going to come back and wrestle again.
It's time for a break. He's got young kids at home. He's banged up. It's time for him to get a long rest.
Well, and it goes to your point, Will, what you said earlier about doing the same ending twice, this emotional send-off.
Yeah.
Why? He's not hanging him up forever. It's not like he left his boots and gear in the ring. That's different. We knew Sting was done, right? The Sting send-off. This is like, hey, I'll see you later. That's it.
Until next time. There we go. All right, let's go back to WrestleDream, rest of the show, see if anything stands out here. As we talked about last week, this was a weird show. There was a lot of just odd darn matches on here. I'm looking at this, I'm like, God damn, they put Mark Briscoe and Jericho on before Mox and Danielson. That's like the semi-main event. Yeah, I don't know about that one. I know last week we talked about Mariah May and Willow Nightingale was probably like the thing we were most interested in outside of was what was going to happen with Danielson. In a lot of ways, that was the match you're most interested in. Yeah, looking at the rest of it, it's like, yeah, that and like the hologram and Beast Mortos 2 out of 3 fall, lucha extravaganza that they had in the middle of the card. I mean, that's the standout stuff for me personally. Like, it was just we described it last week as like a very special episode of Dynamite that you happen to have to pay $50 for. And looking at it now after the fact, it's like, yeah, I mean, outside of the main event, that was the big stuff on this show for me.
I would agree, but one thing, maybe it's just me, and I hope I I'm not trying to sound down, but at this point, I think I'm almost getting tired of seeing Chris Jericho in the ring.
Oh,
It's to
Ben
the
tired of
point.
that.
Yeah,
We've been
it's the
tired.
point.
I'll say it.
It's the point where it's like we've seen enough, guy, and this is granted as great as a name, another great all-time performer. Definitely have respect for what he's done in his career. But at this point, I would rather see him on the commentary booth and do stuff that way than being in the ring because I think you're just taking away from other things of what you're trying to do and develop, talking about the future of AEW. And I'll be honest, I didn't watch it. I saw a couple of highlights from it, but it was the point that nothing really interests me going in as far as some of the other things on the card. It was like, is this worth seeing? But then when you say how the story, I mean, how the matches were booked and Chris Jericho went right before the main event, it's like that just adds to the realism why I didn't want to watch it. But it did its justice. Is it a $50 price tag? Who knows?
Oh,
But
no.
it is what it is, right?
There you go.
So I'll say the thing that I had most interest with, like you just said, well, it was Mariah versus Willow. We
Mhm.
have been a pro Willow show since the beginning. We've been
Indeed.
following Willow and we love Willow and we want her to succeed. And I feel like you should have put the title on her a long time ago, but that's neither here nor there. The main title. What this was for me was how we talked about Mercedes not being able also to kind of kick it up a notch since she's come back from injury. I'm still waiting for Mariah to hit that level. They
Mhm.
put the rocket ship on her at the after the Tony Storm feud. So we were curious that, okay, is this going to be a flash in the pan kind of thing for her, or is she going to maintain this? Now you put her with the most over baby face in all of AEW, at the very least, in my opinion, and you had an okay match to a feud that was what put on the popper maybe a week prior, and it's like, oh yeah, you're getting a title shot, good job. There's no buildup. We had buildup with Tony Storm. Now it just seems that Mariah's character is just going through the motion, cutting the what is it? What was that group with McCool and Lay Cool? It was Lay Cool, right? That's what it was
Like,
called.
cool, yeah.
Like, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, her and Mina are now Lay Cool, right? That's what I'm getting. So I'm really disappointed with how AEW has been portraying Mariah May, being that they had the glamour in their hand to do something better with her. And now you're giving her Willow Nightingale for 10 minutes, and it wasn't that great of a match. No disrespect, just it didn't do anything for me. And it was the curtain jerker if I remember correctly. So that's disappointing. The rest of the card was just mediocre at best for me, but that was just really disappointing.
Damien, let me ask this. And I don't mean to. Oh, go ahead, Will. Go ahead. You go first.
It feels like they're just treading water until they can put her back alongside Tony Storm.
We lost Sellers.
See,
that was so bad. It was so bad. We lost Sellers. He was so mad that we lost Sellers.
He got cut off, and that was like, he's like, that's it. I'm out of here.
All right, we'll get him back. We'll get him back at some point.
You'll be rejoining us in a second. Let's switch gears to this. Since we talked about the card, and so much of this focus at the end was on this Jon Moxley crew, whoever they are, whatever you want to call them, the white t-shirt brigade, whatever. I've seen very, wide range of opinions on this group. And we had the follow-up last night on Dynamite with them running roughshod over people. Oh, looks like he might be back. Is he back? Let's see. I don't see him on camera yet.
He's on camera yet.
Not back yet. Okay, so they're doing all this stuff. They're beating up people. Last night on Dynamite, they're arriving in the back and they're jumping different groups. They're jumping the Dark Order and all this. They show up at the end of the show and they're actually in the middle of the show and they do a whole beatdown in front of the Elite guys and all this. And a lot of people were comparing it online, I saw, to the NWO. So the hat you're wearing there, Damien. And I was sitting there and I was like, hold up. I don't know about that comparison at all. But people are making it, comparing this Moxley crew to the NWO because of them showing up and beating people up in the back. And they're comparing it to like when the NWO first arrived, WCW that summer on Nitro, and the infamous episode at Disney MGM where they threw Ray into the side of the trailer and all this and left people laying out in the back. And it's like, that's not what they're doing. They're not doing. As I said online this morning, where's the danger? They're
Yes.
showing up and jumping people, but they're not beating people up to that respect. Hell, they the guys they jumped up that they put the clip up of online, Action Andretti and them, after they got beat up to them in the Dark Order, they're like cutting promos about it afterwards. Like immediately. So it's like, if you're not even getting beat up to the point that you can't, like, cut a promo, like, come on now, where's the danger with this thing? I don't get it. I'm not getting this Moxley group at that level. Is my issue.
And it's not. And I need y'all to calm down, take a chill pill, and realize that this is not the NWO. This might be the NWOC team when you had Stevie Ray and Scott Norton and all them on a Thunder. But as of right now, we still don't know what they're about. We knew what the NWO was. They came out and told us, the New World Order of Professional Wrestling. They're still nameless. They're the artists formerly known as the Blackpool Combat Club. That's what they are. And they're beating up C-tier wrestlers in AEW. So that's why I said at the beginning of the show, I said, oh, this is retribution. Because they're beating up low-level people, and then they're cutting ridiculous promos because Moxley hasn't changed his promo style in like 15 years. It's like, so what's the end game here? We still don't know. All they did was whoop Danielson's ass, and now they're beating up lower tier guys and have Marina Shafir throw around security guards. Now, if this is an effort to get new wrestlers over or other wrestlers over, like let's say a Marina Shafir, because I've been asking why, that's understandable because maybe Mox handpicked it. But what is the point here? Are we going to have a revolution? Is it going to be, we're going to be spray painting title belts? Are they going to feud with all the factions like the Bucks, etc.? They're just there beating up people. It's like when the Nexus first started, right? And they would come out every week and beat someone's ass. But at the very least, you knew what they were. There were these people from NXT, the new blood, as it were, and they're trying to make a name for themselves. These are established stars. So what? You're disgruntled postal workers now? So is that what we're doing?
Moxley isn't happy with what AEW has become.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know,
the
man.
promo we got last night. He isn't happy with what the AEW has become.
But that's what he said the first night he came back to Tony Schiavone. He said the same thing. I don't like where this company's going. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? Oh, I'm going to beat up Action Andretti. What? Like, what? So I say again, and I can let you take it from here, Will.
Yeah.
What is the end game? And I need to know soon because the white t-shirt crew is not a good enough name. We're going to need something else beside that. And again, Will, you've said it before. I swear on my dad, if this leads to Shane McMahon, I'm going to be pissed off.
Oh, some of the kids really want that.
And I've been kind of hard on AEW the last couple of weeks. I've been the AEW hater of the group. But man, you are not doing yourselves any favor with this stable by having them still be ambiguous at this point.
All right, let me pull up Mad Chocolate Gaming here on Twitch. It's watching right now live. Having a member of the Dark Order and having them run after your truck like the T-1000 makes me more disinterested than I already was. Jumping Colt Cabana means nothing in 2024. Yeah, the choice to have them on Dynamite beating up low-level guys, like I said, Action Andretti is who they're going after. And people like that definitely was an odd choice there, having that happen. We got Silly Sellis back in the screen there. Yes, indeed.
I don't know what happened. I don't know. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened there.
No worries. But yes, I agree with what Mad Chocolate Gaming is saying here, that the choice of having them go after these low-level dudes on Dynamite, that ain't helping matters when they're main eventers. And then on top of that, like I said, they beat up these guys in the back. They beat up an Action Andretti. You beat up some other dudes and the Dark Order, and they're immediately up cutting promos right after. So it's like, if you're going to compare them to the NWO, I'm like, hello, when the NWO invaded Disney MGM that summer, they beat everyone up. So they beat up the Horsemen, they beat up the Dungeon of Doom, and they beat them up so bad that you had a woman and Elizabeth off to the side crying their eyes out as like Arn Anderson was getting loaded into the ambulance. Because it was like, oh my God, these guys were like here with bats. And it was like they're laying people out. There was no promos being cut by the dudes that got beat up immediately. So if you want me to buy into this, I need danger. I need a threat. And I'm telling you're worried about Shane McMahon being like the end game of this.
Yeah.
After last night, my concern was when they did their beatdown in the middle of the show in the ring out in front of the crowd, who's outside the ring not getting touched and just looking on in shock? It was the Bucks and Okada. And I'm like, if all this is leading to is them versus the EVPs who will suddenly now be faces again, defending the company, fuck that. I have no interest. I have no interest at all if this is what this is going to be. Hell, it's already like they're rehashing the Bucks turning bad and laying out Tony Khan and all that when they did that months ago. So if you're just going to rewind it and make them be the saviors of, AEW, the EVPs are going to get back together. Kenny Omega is going to come back and we'll get the Elite together to fight Mox and his gang. If that's where this is going, no, not for me at all in any way, shape, or form. So
well, it becomes the law of diminishing returns at this point because, like you just said, the Bucks have turned heel and turned face multiple times over the last couple of years to the point where, if you remember correctly, kids, back in April, they put Tony Khan in a neck brace. So all of a sudden now they're going to be defending the honor of AEW.
Defend the shield.
The only thing, the only way I see this works is if Mox and crew are anti-heroes, not necessarily heels or faces, but they want to disrupt what the Bucks and company and Okada were doing to kind of kill that previous storyline with Tony Khan that didn't seem to go anywhere after the draft. You can only have so many weeks where Okada's coming on and saying the word bitch, right? And before you're kind of like tuning out. So that's the only way for me it could work if these two factions go against each other. But to do a complete 180 for the Bucks this quickly against Mox and Co., I'm out.
All right, Sella, since you're back, any thoughts on Moxley's white t-shirt gang and what they're trying to do here? Because we're both underwhelmed, very much so.
To me, I think it's just unnecessary. Don't try to repackage like you always mentioned, like it seemed like your poor man's NWO, or trying to make something going back to the difference between when it was the WCW versus WWF during that time. It seemed like it's just so gimmicky where you're trying to really stretch on something to get a reaction, and it's like we've seen this before. So it's like I don't know, maybe do Sharks and Jets if you want to do a white t-shirt game. If you want to really be real about something, do something very creative of what we can, bring entertainment to it. But I do want to go back to one thing that we mentioned earlier about Mariah May, and hopefully this is not too bad of a transition if you don't mind, because this is what I wanted to say earlier. And if you guys said it, I do apologize when I jumped off. Do you think the way that Mariah May is going, based on how you just set up, Damien, how you felt about that match, could we see Tiffany Stratton go in the same type of direction with WWE?
Yes, but I honestly think, and I'm not a Tiffy fan. You guys know this. I'm not a Tiffany Stratton guy. Do I think she could be presented better? Yes. Once you get away from Nia Jax, I actually think you could do a babyface turn for Tiffany Stratton eventually, sooner rather than later. So you can make her the face of your division. She could sell her merch if she turns babyface. So yeah, I could see them doing that in WWE, but there's something not clicking with Mariah, and I've been trying to put my finger on it. And I think it's because I think we shot our load. I'll say it that way. Sorry, I couldn't think of a better phrase. We shot our load on her first feud, and now it's treading water to something what Will said earlier. So I'm just missing something with Mariah. It just doesn't seem to be working.
All right. Let's break up the first half there, because we went a little long. We don't have the indie spotlight this week. So here's what we're going to do. Let's go to our mid-show break. When we come back, we'll talk more women's wrestling. We will get into the PWI Women's 250 that dropped this week. We'll take a look at that, give our thoughts. And from there, who knows? We got a second half of this show to fill. So stay with us, folks. Your Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. We'll be back right after this.
A little birdie told me, everybody, that you may be interested in doing some sponsorship and advertising opportunities with us here at Big Gold Belt Media. You know what? You might as well, because we are the golden standard for all of your media needs. Why would you want to go anywhere else? Besides, all of your pre-roll ads, your mid-roll ads, as well as your on-air reads are going to be done by me, Damien G. Yeah, professional broadcaster, Damien G. We do all types of social media promotions. That means your podcast, your IG, your Facebook, your Twitter, and your business website all get shouted out on our network here at Big Gold Belt Media, where we cover wrestling, movies, comics, and more. And you can find out more information and make those inquiries, kids, because, limited time offer here at Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com. Again, that is Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com. Why would you want to go anywhere else? I wouldn't. Well, I work here, but I still wouldn't even if I didn't. So again, Big Gold Belt Media for all your sponsorship and advertising opportunities, your podcast, your IG, your Facebook, your Twitter, all of your social media platforms, as well as any business website you want us to promote on our show. Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com, and let them know Damon G sent you.
Thanks for being with us here tonight, folks, on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. We're going to keep the women's wrestling talk going now, as this week was the Women's 250 week. The 250 hottest women's wrestler list from Pro Wrestling Illustrated dropped this week. They always follow up the 500 with the Women's 250 the following month. So we're going to take a look at this, see what stands out to us and all that good stuff. So to start, let's do this. Let's look at the top 10. I always like to start with the top 10 and then go from there. So, starting at number 10 this year is Ring of Honor Women's Champion Athena, who's been dominating that belt for ages now. Lady we were just talking about, Mariah May, is at number 9. Babyface favorite of the show, Willow Nightingale, at number 8. Bailey at number 7. Sari is at number 6. Stephanie Vaquer, who debuted on NXT this past week, at number 5. Maika at number 4. Number 3 is Rhea Ripley. Number 2, your Impact TNA Women's Champion, and Lord knows, regular face on NXT over the last few months, Jordynne Grace. And last but not least, Timeless Toni Storm takes the number 1 spot in this year's Women's 250 from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. For myself, looking at that top 10, I think the biggest surprise to me is how high they went with Jordynne Grace, but given that she was breaking barriers and stuff that was absolutely unheard of, like defending the TNA Women's Championship on NXT and all this, like, I can see where it'd be warranted. She definitely did stuff that, hell, we thought would have been possible between the Royal Rumble appearance and all this. It's like Jordynne Grace had a hell of a year. So I get it, putting her that high up there. Other than that, the top, this is the usual deal with their top 10s. They like to spread, as we always say, they like to spread around, got to be political about this in a way, and, got to make sure we have representation from the different companies and stuff. And it's a nice mix in that top 10 between Ring of Honor, AEW, Stardom, Stephanie Vaquer making it in there. Well, probably a lot based off, how hot a free agent she was before she signed with NXT, and Toni Storm taking the top spot. So I think it kind of is what it is. But Damian, let's go to you first. It's one of our women's wrestling aficionados here. Thoughts on the top 10 before we look anywhere else into this?
When I saw Jordynne Grace at number 2, I said, damn right. You just basically laid it all out, man. She has done so much. Forget that she's in TNA. The fact that she's been so dominant, right? And she's been in the Rumble. She's been on NXT. People know exactly who she is. So it's not just this best kept secret anymore. Everybody now knows who Jordynne Grace is and the impact Big Mama Pump is making out here in the professional wrestling landscape. Power women's wrestlers, I'm all for. It's good to see her on multiple platforms, like we said. So I am not surprised that she was at number 2. What really made me happy, I'll say happy, was seeing Sari at number 6. And here's why. If you remember when she was in NXT, they tried to make her into the Sailor Moon transformation magical girl with the pendant that she got from her grandma. And then she left the company shortly thereafter, after all that shenanigans. And for her to go back to Japan and remind the general populace that she was one of the best wrestlers on the planet, that's why WWE brought her in the first place. that warms my heart because she could have gone back to Japan a totally different wrestler, kind of like, oh man, shucks, I
Could have
messed up
killed her
in WWE.
confidence.
It would have killed her confidence. But to see her in the top 10, let alone at 6, bravissimo. But again, I'll go back my last point. Mariah May at 9. I think that's a little too high. I think she's a product of the Tony Storm aura. I'll say that. That got Tony Storm the hottest gimmick in AEW, men's or women's. I guess in the inception of the company, since the inception of the company, that was the most unique over gimmick. That it was a throwback for us heads back in the 80s where it was over the top, almost like Gold Dust, But she was a great wrestler and she was a great character more than she showed at any other point in WWE or in any other place she was at. But I think Mariah got the rub from Tony, and that's why she's at 9. But if it wasn't for Tony Storm, I don't think she'd be in the top 10. So I think she's rated a little bit too high.
All right, Celis.
Okay, so shout out to Jordan Grace. Once again, I definitely give kudos for her being number 2. For her starting the trend of what Impact and NXT have worked together to do cross platforms that kind of led the way for more people to do that. I think she did it in a very, very classy way where she did it multiple times, and each time she put on a great show to do what needed to be done. I would go 2 things here, and I hope I'm not teasing her because I want to reference somebody that's not in the top 10. Is it okay if I do that?
Go for it.
I think
Cool.
Bailey being at number 7 to me was a little high. Now, I know she won the Royal Rumble. Kudos. I know she was a world title. She had her WrestleMania moment. Kudos. However, I don't think what Bailey did this year was anything special at all. Granted, once again, I give her kudos of adding to her legacy of being a Rumble winner. That's something that's hard to do. Not everybody does it. We have people that win it multiple times. So it just shows how hard it is to get that rub over. So I definitely, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. We just got a 2-run jack in the bottom of the ninth.
Yes, sir.
Focus here. Focus here. My goodness. Focus here. That reminds me of Allah when we played the Cubs in the World Series. Okay, focus. However, the biggest thing that I want to say is I think is a disservice for Roxanne Perez not to be in the top 10. Roxanne Perez, speaking of Jordan Grace, who Roxanne Perez went over Jordan Grace. Granted, it was on the NXT platform because NXT would definitely probably get the rub when you do NXT versus Impact.
Right.
I get it. But I think Roxanne Perez not being in that top 10 was a disservice because she is literally probably low-key had one of the best years in women's wrestling that does not get enough justification of how good she is and how young she is. She is on the skyrocket where we talked about Mariah May being on that she is going to propel that. I think she is probably the best women's prospect at NXT since the Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks era that they had back then. I think she is the best prospect. Now, will that turn over to the main roster? Who knows? We'll see. But I think it's a great thing to see what she's doing. But shout out to Bailey. You are a great wrestler. I love you, literally. But I don't think you deserve to be in the top 10 this year.
You sure
I
that's
hear
not
what
your
you're
Bay
saying.
Area talking, sir? That you love Bailey?
I mean, that might be my babe. She is my, like, literally. I
Yeah.
love her. I'm married, but if Bailey came in right now, I'm sorry. I may have to be in trouble. But
Now,
but
Celis, I did see people sharing your sentiment about Roxanne Perez when the list
Yeah.
dropped. A lot of people were
Yes.
like, how is she not in the top 10? How is she falling out there just at number 11, just outside the top 10 with the run she's had at NXT, being the
Yes.
dominant NXT women's champion for this long? Hell, to the point now where people are like, we would have thought she would have been called up by now.
Long
Yep.
But
time ago.
she is by far the face of that women's division and has been for some time and has,
Absolutely.
had tremendous matches with a wide variety of people. They were of different experience levels. So I think when I mentioned earlier about how that top 10 is very political with
Yep.
different, making sure there's different representation from different groups.
Yep.
I think that's exactly what Roxanne Perez was a victim of, that the politics of representation kept her out of that top 10. And
And I
that's
would
why she's
add,
just outside of it, number 11.
and I want to add one more. EO Sky, I think probably had
Number
some of the
13.
best spots in wrestling this year with some of the matches that she has had this year, being in the Money in the Bank match and things of that nature. She's probably had some of the best spots this year that I was very happy to see her be in that top 15. But just Bailey was just the one that I thought was a little bit high for me. But Roxanne Perez has been almost low key one of the wrestlers of the year for 2024 for me.
All right, Damian, I'm going to throw this to you.
Sure.
Standouts that jump out at you from the rest of the list. We got
Oh,
250
wow.
names here, and we only been looking at the top 10. Page
All right.
through and see what jumps out at you. Looking at what else we got here.
So instead of giving you a name, I'm going to just say this. I'm going to say, looking at this list, WWE's future is in good hands. Because if you look at, we have Rhea at 3, Stephanie Vaquer at 5, Bailey at 7, right? Roxanne at 11, Liv Morgan at 12, EO 13. And then we get down to Becky at 17, who barely did anything this year. Yeah. Lyra Valkyria at 20.
That feels kind of high.
That feels a little high, but her work in NXT was low-key amazing. So Nia at 22, Julia at 21. What that leads me to believe is WWE is going to be in good hands in its women's division. Kalani Jordan at 29, Naomi at 30, Tiffany Stratton at 32. And I saw Jada Parker in the 90s. I believe I saw her in the 90s. So,
she's 90 exactly. 90 exactly.
So Shawn Michaels, good job. That's one. Number 2, Celis. I want to say what you said earlier. I want to echo about the last time we were this excited for NXT women coming up was during the 4 Horsewomen era, or even right before that with Paige and Natty and Emma.
Exactly. Yep.
That women's revolution that came up from NXT to the main roster. We're in good hands here, man.
Yes.
Like and not even just the wrestlers, the athletes turned wrestlers. And I'll say it. I'm not a Tiffany Stratton guy, but I know what they're doing. I see why they're doing it. She's gonna sell a lot of merch. She's basically a better version. She's Sable, but can wrestle and has a personality. So we're in good hands. That's what I'm gonna say for WWE. AEW, come on, y'all. Come on. After Mariah May and Toni Storm, we keep going. I saw Riho on the list. I'm like, that wasn't for your AEW work. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
So if all we got is maybe a top-heavy AEW, right, for women's matches, won't you think this warrants more than one women's match a card now? If you have it being this top-heavy,
indeed,
and even look, Sheeta, she's the shooter, right, of the group, 31. Come on, man. You can't find more space for your women's wrestling on your 2-hour program?
They got Julia Hart at 26 on here.
Yep.
So what are we doing, TK? What are we doing? You need to put more. If this list tells me anything, is that this is a screaming billboard. More focus on women's wrestling.
And let's also note, much as what happened with Roman Reigns in the 500, Mercedes Moné did not qualify for the list because she did not have enough matches in the active period. So Mercedes is not to be found on here. We are not overlooking her. Same situation that happened with Roman Reigns, which personally, I think if you're that big, if you're that much of a title holder and that much figured into things, that should trump that. I'm not crazy about that rule because come on, this is kayfabe. Let's just cut the crap and
so
put them on the list up there.
Let me ask this question though. I know the person, I know their number. I just want to see if you don't look at the list and just guess.
Okay, I'm not looking.
Okay. Based on how she did this year, based on entertainment value.
Okay.
Chelsea Green.
Oh.
She should be.
She should be
in the top 50.
She didn't win enough to warrant a high ranking kayfabe.
Yeah, the win loss, the kayfabe, they're going to knock her down because of that. So she's probably like around 100 or something, I bet.
All right. What you say, Daniel? If you give me an exact number, what would you say?
I'd say in the 60s.
She's 112.
Holy, where the players dwell.
Yeah,
I see.
Way down there. After coming off her, of course, this is in the ratings here, but coming off, just a week or two back when she had that the dumpster match with Mia Yim on SmackDown.
Great match.
And put in a hell of a performance. Just between that and just her appearances in the Royal Rumble, she has quickly become an MVP of just a character. She gets the idea that Chelsea Green is there to be a character, and that is
Yes.
invaluable
Yes.
It is.
in pro wrestling. And
It
so
is.
many people don't get that. It's for her specifically, it's not about wins and losses.
Correct.
It's about being a character and thriving off of that and interacting with other people on there. So,
Yeah.
I'm very high on Chelsea Green.
And to your point, Will, I was actually really pleased at the match she had with Mia because this highlighted the fact that Chelsea Green has always been a damn good wrestler.
Yep.
And we forgot
Yep.
about
Confident.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We forgot about that because she's been so entertaining as when she first came back as this Karen character, right? And now, like, she's just Chelsea. And we appreciate that. So I'm glad that the wrestling public is able to remember that she actually was a good wrestler trained by Lance Storm. So
Yes.
kudos. We need to be reminded every once in a while that, oh, just because you're entertaining, and I'll make this comparison, a male counterpart, Kevin Owens. We forget that KO is a good wrestler, but
Yeah.
he's so entertaining that we kind of forget about it. And that's what I see happening with Chelsea Green. Every so often, we need to be reminded this girl could work.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right. Any other thoughts on the 250? I'm good on talking about the 250. Anything else you want to point out?
I'm good myself too.
I'm good. I'm doing a quick perusal, but I'm good.
Same.
All right. Let's wrap that one up. We got about 10 minutes left here. So I'm going to make this open floor.
Oh, yeah.
Well, as Cody Rhodes would say, what you want to talk about?
Go ahead,
I'll
Sellers.
say this. What are your guys' thoughts about how Raw has now switched to 2 hours the last couple of weeks? And of course, shifting to Netflix soon in January. Is
Right.
the pacing of a 2-hour Raw show, which SmackDown has already been 2 hours and Raw's been 3 hours for the longest time now, scaling back to 2. Is it working? Is it not working? Why? And do we anticipate Netflix continuing to be 2 hours?
Okay. We've had 2 episodes so far, and this past one was taped. This week's one. So it's been a little bumpy of a transition, it seems to me. But I absolutely love it, and I want it to stay that way. And I know it's not gonna, because Netflix is, as we've talked about on the show, I'm pretty sure the deal when they move to Netflix is it will be an open-ended end time. It might be 2 hours and 20 minutes one week. It might be 2:15. It might be. I think they're gonna not try to be 3. There might be the occasional 3-hour episode, but I think with Netflix, it's going to be more likely. When they're on Peacock these days with one of their PLEs, it's go as long as you want, do your show. I love it being 2 hours. Lord knows this week I was out for about the first 40 minutes Raw, and I got home, and as the last match was on, I had totally forgot being it's only been 1 week at this point, and they wrapped up at 10 o'clock, and I was like, holy crap, that's it.
What do I do?
It's over.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was so relieving just to be like, I go back to when we talk about these marathon indie shows, it's the same thing with wrestling TV for me. Leave me wanting more.
Yes.
Don't leave me at the end of the show exhausted and glad it's done. 5-hour plus episode of a WrestleDream this past weekend. Not. So there you go. I mean, just leave me wanting more at the end of the show. Leave me excited about what's next. Don't leave me like, oh my God, thank God that's finally over. I can go do something else.
Right.
And 2 hours of Raw is plenty for me. That's where I'm.
So since I'm in the central time zone, when Raw starts at 7 and ends at 9, I'm ecstatic because I still can get some stuff done at 9 o'clock in the evening. So I'm very happy that it's 2 hours. So what I'll say about the bumpy transition, Will, what's also not helping it? It's shoehorning Crown Jewel. The storyline for Crown Jewel.
Yes.
So we've already broken the barrier of the brand split because of Crown Jewel, right? So now you had Liv, you had Tiffy, you had Nia, all on the same show with Rhea, right? Shoehorning for these 2 hours because we need to get something in for Crown Jewel. I'm be interested to see once we get to Survivor Series and then Rumble season, how the 2-hour constraint is in that realm, because we're going to be building the better and longer term storylines instead of trying to heat it up on the Jiffy Pop to get it for Crown Jewel. So I love the fact that it's 2 hours. It's a breeze for me, but at the same token, I get why some people aren't liking it. It's a little janky, but only because we're having to placate to Crown Jewel thus far. I want to see what happens going forward past Crown Jewel in terms of storylines, and if we're going to get a squeeze, because I referenced it before about AEW not having enough women's wrestling. Well, women's wrestling have a bit of a squeeze when WWE goes 2 hours and we're not talking about Crown Jewel, because what we're doing now is we're focusing strictly on Rhea, Tiffy, Liv, and Nia.
Yep. Yep.
We still got a roster of other talented women that we can get and heat up. Damage Control, for instance. Kairi Sane's been a lackey this entire time, and I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't like it. Mia Yim finally got a W. So we're gonna have a bit of a crunch when that 2 hour time frame really kicks in for like I said, for Rumble and for Survivor Series. But so far, it's okay. I just like having extra time to do stuff. We're not 16 anymore to wait for Silk Stockings to come on, after
That's
the
for
USA
sure.
Network or Rhonda Shear Live. You know what I mean? We don't have that anymore. So I like having extra time to go to the gym after Raw. So thank you, WWE.
So I would say this. I love the 2 hours itself, but even though you say on Central Time, Damien, for you is 7 to 9, I would love the old school days where it was 9 to 11. Start Raw at
Interesting.
9, go to Warzone at 10, and it goes off like 11:05, 11:07, like you said, Will, where it goes back to the times when we were growing up, and we were younger, as far as how that frame went. I love the 9 to 11 spot, and sometimes maybe that would take away, some of the interest going from the Monday Night Football starting at that time, especially during this fall season. And I know some of the prime 8 o'clock shows on Network T come on, but if Raw comes on at 9, maybe I'll watch it from 9 to 11. It's still 8 to 10 Central, but I love the 2 hours. I do not want wrestling to go back to 3 hours at all, ever again.
We're in agreement on that one, us old heads. It's what it is. I do not need 3 hour episodes of Raw. I mean, I can't think of the last time I made it through an entire 3 hour Raw. I was usually seeing the beginning, making it through whatever they did at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
And shortly after that, that'd be the end of it. And I'd catch the rest the next day, the next morning. I wasn't sitting there for all 3 hours of that. It's just too damn long at the beginning of the week when you're old. What it is.
Let's be real
I'm
here,
not
dude.
afraid to
Like, we're
say
in the
it.
age bracket. We're not trying to be like,
Yes.
what? My bags are closing. Like, no, man, I don't got that in me anymore.
9
I'm
o'clock, we're
sorry.
rounding that time for bed. It's like, let's get our last preparations because we got to get up dark 30 in the morning for whatever we got to do for our work. So it's like, let's get it in so we can get it done.
There you go. All right.
So before we
Anything
go,
else?
I got one. Yeah, I got one.
Hit it.
In one sentence, how would you fix? Matter of fact, make it 2 sentences. How would you fix AEW right now?
Ooh.
What would you add? What would you take away? What would you tweak? Because I said my piece. I said more women's wrestling and less EVP shenanigans. And maybe I'd be more, unless Jericho, I'd be more interested.
I would
know.
address the issues of their live crowds being dead.
Okay.
And having these small crowds. So my thing would be some kind of ticket promotion to like get people in there, whether it's free kids, 2 for 1, maybe the last day, or something like that. But get more people in the building somehow, some way. Especially you got the TV deal. You can afford to take the loss. You got the TV deal. You need more people in those buildings.
Good point.
It's dark and like there's not life week to week on that show. And I think they need to work on that. And you got the TV deal now. So ticket promotion is what I'm thinking for me personally.
Sellers?
For me, I would say find your identity because we still don't know who you are. And I think, you're not an alternate or a copy or plan B to WWE. Be what you want to be. Like, say, when you look at AEW wrestling, this is what we are, and go through it. Just like when Vince McMahon tried to create the XFL, you want it to be a different style of football, and this is what you had to do, and just live or die by it. And I think you're afraid to live on that risk of who you are, so just do it. I know that was more than 2 sentences, but
it's fine.
Find your identity. Find your identity.
Well, and to that point, I'll say this. When AEW started, and we've talked about this on the show, they were the alternative, right? To WWE. They were the wrestling show.
Yep.
Somewhere along the lines, and I think we hinted at it, maybe it was when Cody left, things started to kind of unravel
Mhm.
And then, Jericho became more of a mainstay because now Cody's gone. Then Mox finally went on vacation. So we've been running in place for a little while now. But to Will's point also, yeah, those crowds have been looking kind of dreck, man. So treat it like WCW Worldwide. Let the kids in free or something so we can get more interest in your product. Go back to being the wrestling show and stop trying to be cool. Stop trying to be funny. You're not. Just wrestle and you'll get your viewership back. I know the zealots are never going to leave, but you prided yourself on being the alternative. Like, for instance, TNA, pardon the pun, hard to kill. We ain't killing TNA. Hootie tried. We've seen it. We've done it. NWA is probably going to go down the toilet bowl. So right now, AEW, like you said, Will, they have that money in the bank now, pardon that one, from the TV deal. You got 3 years. Don't make them not pick up that option for a 4th year. Start that now. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. You got the cushion right now to try some outside the box ideas. Try something different, something of some sort, because obviously the hand you're playing, and it's not connecting. It's not working. So some kind of change got to happen. All right. There we go, folks. We made it to our hour. There we go. Big Gold Belt Media doing our thing here each and every Thursday night. So we go around the horn here with all the different stuff to promote and plug here. So first on social media, it's at Big Gold Belt across the board, whether we're talking X, Instagram, all that good stuff at Big Gold Belt. Like it shows right down there in the left-hand corner of the screen. If you are watching live, the podcast version of the video stream lives on YouTube. If you're looking to watch, the podcast version drops shortly thereafter on all your favorite podcast platforms. So if you want just audio, we got you covered that way. If you want the video, it lives on YouTube, streaming live on Twitch and YouTube and on X each and every week, Thursdays at 8 p.m. Lots of ways to watch what's happening here at Big Gold Belt Media. As I mentioned at the top of the show, our man 2 Chainz is up in New York City at New York Comic-Con. Lots going on up there. It's all over our social media feed. So if you're into the comic stuff, lots of anime talk today, lots of stuff he was doing with Crunchyroll today. So he's got you covered at Big Gold Belt on all that stuff. And also, I'm sure there's stuff going up on the website, biggoldbelt.com. So Big Gold Belt across the board. Got you for everything wrestling, movies, comics, and more. But for this week, that is it. We are here. So we'll be back next Thursday talking more wrestling action. We'll see what's up. We have no big shows this weekend. So for once, it's not a pay-per-view week. So next week should be interesting. We might have one of those weeks where we can get some outside the box ideas into the mix for next week's show. But either way, next Thursday, 8 p.m., this is where you'll be able to find us. So we hope you join us. Until then, stay safe, watch some wrestling, and we will talk to you later.